Well, good morning, everybody. It is currently just after 10 a.m. here in the UK and at some point in the distant evening in Japan. And I'm joined by someone today that I've wanted to speak to for better part of quarter of a century. He's worked in WWF, he's worked in Ring of Honor, and is currently the lead announcer for New Japan Pro Wrestling. He is the eponymous voice of Japanese wrestling across the English-speaking world, none other than the greatest announcer in history himself, Mr. Kevin Kelly. How are you, sir?
Thank you. Thank you, Rich. You read that perfectly, just the way I wrote it.
The check just arrived, so...
Yes, it did.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, man. How are you? Merry Christmas.
And to you, and of course, a forthcoming Happy New Year as well.
Yeah.
It's
2020 was a real stink fest, so we're hoping for a better one.
Apparently we're getting 2020 Part 2 next year, the Groundhog Day special, so... at least according to my sources, but I'm sure they're wrong. So we are mere days away from Wrestle Kingdom as we speak, and
Yes.
I can't imagine the buzz that's going on in Tokyo right now.
It's the anticipation is probably more prevalent in Tokyo than I am aware of, because I am largely shuttered here in my quarantine hotel in the Tsukuji district. I want to make sure I'm saying that right, which is very close to the water. There's famous fish market right here.
Of course, yes.
And so there's a lot of vendors and fish stands. I like sushi, but I don't like the idea of smashing in next to people who are also eating sushi. So I've taken a pass on that. But I did promise Gino that I would take him here.
Of course. And how is Gino? Are you, have you spoken to him much recently, or?
Well, we did the last 3 shows of the year together, and that was a struggle here on using Zoom to try to be able to see him and him see me while we're talking, because my internet is kind of poo. But he's doing well. He's doing well. He'll be back in Japan in the new year.
That's great. I'm really pleased to hear that. I'm glad to obviously know that you're out in Japan already and that Gino will be joining you. And I presume Chris is resident in Japan. Is that right?
He is. He is. I kind of took one for the team here. I needed to get my visa renewed. And so they said, you'd have to do a 14-day quarantine. So the latest you could come would be on the 19th. And I was like, all right, I'll do it this once, but no more.
No. And of course, missing Christmas with your family and everything like that's got to have been difficult as well.
Oh, it's terrible. My sons are older, but my wife and I, it's a big thing. And I zoomed in, and it was okay. And we did our little Christmas thing before I left, and that was different and fun, but it's just not the same. So, but I was happy to make the sacrifice so that the fans could have the English commentary team together. So it'll be myself and Rocky and Chris ringside on the floor of the Tokyo Dome, calling both nights of Wrestle Kingdom and New Year's Dash.
Nice. That's awesome. And actually mentioning New Year's Dash brings me neatly on in a completely seamless segue to how we got to start talking, because it was New Year's Dash 2018 when yourself and myself met outside Corrigan Hall and took a photo together. And then about, I would say, possibly 5-6 months later, I took a chance on tweeting you with that image and said I'd love to design for you. How does that look from your perspective? So, because I've always wanted to ask you this, when someone like myself tweets you and says, hey, we met in Japan, I'd like X opportunity, how does that appear to yourself as an on-screen personality?
Well, I'm also a businessman, and I've worked in sales for a number of years. So I appreciate that. I appreciate asking for the business. Like, just for example, I just got a new follower, and he sent me a note about he's looking forward to Wrestle Kingdom, and I looked who he was, and he's an editor for a gaming magazine. So my son has been looking for a break in writing, and I said, hey, could you give the kid a shot here and just let him write a spec review and tell him what, if he's on the right track or whatever, if he should pick another line of work. And the guy wrote me back immediately. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So nothing ventured, nothing gained. I never see anything wrong with it.
Mhm.
I appreciate the forthrightness. I appreciate the go-getiveness to earn some business. And you seem to have a good idea about what we would come together to do.
Mhm.
You are probably more in line with the type of designer that I would look for, because you're probably a little closer in age to me
Mhm.
than some others. I'm much older than you, but we're a little closer in age, and I think that you probably would be able to do something that I would be thinking of, and vice versa, and that's what's happened.
We can drop all the references that the kids won't get.
They don't get it. They don't understand it.
Oh God, I tell you what, nothing makes you feel older than dropping a reference on something from your childhood, and they go, "What's that?" And you just,
What's that? Yeah.
oh no, no, I've
I
hit
look
that
at
point.
when I look at the roster, of New Japan stars, and I was telling my wife this. I said,
Mm,
most of these guys could be my sons, because they're in their mid to late 20s,
right.
and quite a few of them, I would be old enough to be their dad. So it's a good bond, because I do have sort of that fatherly instinct for them
Mm.
when they're in the ring, when they're out of the ring, and I'm always telling them to be careful and
Mm.
get home early, and don't get in trouble, and all those types of things.
It's funny actually that you say it, because I do recognize that when we converse as well, when we're talking about designs or even just chatting, and you do take on that sort of protective role. Like I know when I spoke to you about one of my previous designs, and you said, "Oh, you can't use that word because it's something here in Japan that's different to how you perceive it in the West." And it was
Right.
so useful to me to have that knowledge that I don't think a lot of people would impart. And I feel like with yourself that your role does go beyond announcer, that you do take people under your wing a lot and mentor and guide them. Who's been an influential mentor to you?
Well, I mean, I've had quite a few and been very blessed to have some great mentors like Jim Cornette
Hmm.
and Dr. Tom Pritchard during my time in WWF, and then beyond that, they're still very still close with both of them today. Certainly, Tiger Hattori has been a mentor of mine here, and I've benefited greatly from people who no one knows that kind of work in the either with the New Japan World Team or with the TVSI side. So they've been great, and Rocky's a mentor of mine. Like my first tour of the first time I came here was in October of 2015, and I knew Carl Anderson, from coming over to Ring of Honor, and have known him for years. So I immediately sort of latched onto him. But everybody that had been here before took an interest in making sure that I knew what to do and where to go. And we get our bags over here, and we put them on the bus, and then we sit and we wait. Okay, and here's the hotel, and they have breakfast in the morning, and all this and that. And 15 minutes early is on time, so be earlier than that if you want to be early. So little stuff like that. But I've had a lot of great mentors, and have learned. That was one of the things. Like, wrestling is one of those businesses where it's mouth shut, ears open. So I learned from everybody. I'm currently like really into the Ron Fuller Studcast, and Ron Fuller was a territory guy in the 70s. He owned Knoxville, and then went to he also bought Pensacola and ran the Gulf Coast territory, and was wildly successful as a promoter. So I learned from him, just by listening to his podcast.
That is the beauty of this now, is obviously there's the difficulties of being locked down or quarantining as you are, but the technology now that we've got provides us with this access to people that we would never have heard from before. I can't imagine territory guys back in the day giving that information out so freely.
It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Dr. Tom Pritchard, and I actually work with, I edit Joe Hendry and his podcast Wrestling University, and listening to that as I'm editing it, Dr. Tom's knowledge base is incredible. I I feel blessed to be a fan these days because we've got so much going on, what with the programming, but all the extra content around it. And technology also provides us that access to merchandise where, in a world where we're currently COVID bound, we can still support our favorites by buying merchandise. But something I wanted to pick up on with you, and you mentioned your business acumen, is how important is quality over quantity when it comes to merch? Because we do see people put out a lot of shirts that may or may not be of varying quality, or some wrestlers and talents and personalities put out very few that are of a higher standard. And I wanted to ask you, which do you feel is more important?
The idea of merchandise is to both represent your brand and to make money.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're making money but sacrificing your brand, in the end, you're doing yourself harm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the email that you don't send, the tweet that you don't post, the shirt that you don't put out. Sometimes is beneficial because it can wind up doing more harm than good.
That is something I'm guilty of, I must say, is not putting out the tweet because of lack of self-confidence, I suppose, and belief. And I know when I tweeted you that time, it was something that took me probably about 2 days to be able to do, because I grew up watching you on television. I mentioned that to you in Tokyo as well. I said, I've watched you since the late 90s. I'm a huge fan of your work. And I always thought you got a really rough deal off The Rock, actually, back in the day. But
yeah, I appreciate that. It's the one thing that got me over more than anything else, man.
Right.
From any of the stuff that I ever did there, and I knew it would, because he was the biggest star, and I had the easiest job in the world, and that was just to try and not laugh. Yeah. Hold the microphone, be his straight man, and that's the one thing. That and what happened at Brian Pillman's house are the two things I get asked about the most. They don't ask me about my favorite metal match. They don't ask about they don't ask about anything else. They ask about those two things, and then that's pretty much it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I can ask you about one that you might probably get asked about quite a lot, which was the Acolytes versus the infamous beatdown match there was yourself on commentary. I believe Jim Corderas was the referee, and the Acolytes beat the High Holy
Public Enemy.
Public Enemy, that was it, yes. And how did that look when you're on commentary and you're trying to call a match that?
It was brutal. It wasn't one of our finest moments, shall we say. But
Sunday Night Heat, wasn't it?
Sunday Night Heat was a really underrated show.
It was. We loved it here because we didn't get a lot of wrestling in the UK unless you had Sky. And Sunday Night Heat and a few pay-per-views a year at that time were on Channel 4, which was free to air. Mm-hmm. So for us, it was manna from heaven. And I was an avid Sunday Night Heat watcher, which is why I got to know your work a lot. So
I enjoyed it. I had a variety of partners, whether it was Shane McMahon or Jim Cornette or Terry Taylor for a whole bunch of them, Dr. Tom. It was a lot of fun. And then and back then it was, we understood the value of the European audience.
Right.
And needing to do things in a very PG way. So I'm not quite sure, because I didn't sit in the edit. I'm not quite sure how much of that match they actually showed.
I can't remember.
It may have been a lot of crowd shots. Hey, let's go to a crowd shot.
I know they did like to cut away to crowd shots whenever there was like a chair shot thrown or anything particularly violent. And I don't remember seeing a lot of blood.
Anything that was pushing the envelope wasn't going to fly.
It's really interesting though, because
I'm a fan of that. I like that because I grew up again watching championship wrestling from Florida.
Okay, yeah.
And a wrestler gets busted open and the camera's trying to cut around it, cut away from it, but if they just can't, here comes the championship wrestling from Florida logo. Mm-hmm. And you still heard Gordon, he's still describing it. It certainly didn't lessen the effect of it. In some regards, it made it even worse. It made it more, because then it's theater of the mind. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget one soundbite that Gordon had.
Okay.
Steve Keirn was wrestling somebody, and Steve Keirn, of course, went on to become Skinner and was the original person in charge of FCW. Just for those who may not know who Steve Keirn was. Anyway, Steve Keirn got busted open in this match, and Gordon described, because there was blood everywhere on the mat after the match, Gordon described it as having had some of the bark removed from the tree. Ooh. And I was like, oh, what an ugly wound that has to be. Oh my God. And so the white canvas, and there is just blood everywhere. I was like, holy moly, what did he look like? We never saw him.
No. And to this day, that will carry that image of the bar. I've shuddered at the thought of that. That's horrifying. That's worse than actually seeing it. Definitely, 100%.
Like somebody put tater bits on and went in there and scrubbed him. Oh. Jesus! But it was those are those kinds of things, and so it's that branding and that emotive language that I try to focus on commentary. And I try to paint that word picture to make those emotional moments that you're visually seeing stick with you more. And it can't be everything is, the Tony Schiavone, the greatest night in the history of our sport. It can't be that. There are levels and layers. But when something is visceral like that, you really have to kind of dig deep into your Rolodex to try to come up with a unique way of stating it so that it sets it apart from everything else they're going to see.
Absolutely right. And that actually ties neatly into the first design that we did together, which was the Destino shirt with one of your iconic calls. And everyone around the world will know when that move is hit, because you just scream it into the microphone, and it is without doubt the thing I would think you're known for in New Japan Pro Wrestling, which is your finishing move calls. So with that design, we had initially pitched the idea of 4 different shirts with that motif. And it was the Destino, One Winged Angel, High Fly Flow, and Rainmaker was the 4th.
Right.
And we got told that we weren't allowed to have the 4 shirts, which was, I felt, quite unfortunate. But we obviously went with Destino. How many times do you get that shouted to you in the street? Does that happen a lot? I suppose Japan's quite different in etiquette, so I would imagine you don't get shouted to in the street very often.
Japan is different. I probably see a lot more of it on social media in terms of fans writing me and responding to me about that. It was an homage to soccer announcers who I love. Andres Cantor is my favorite. And I'll watch other sports for their announcing. And I'll gravitate more towards the sport or the game than I really like the announcer. I may not have a rooting interest in the teams. In fact, with most soccer, I couldn't even tell you who's playing. But that's okay, because I'm going to stick around and wait for somebody to put one in the back of the net so he can shout goal, on and on and on. And I figured with the actual, it being a Spanish word, and with Naito's lineage through Mexico, that it was a great tie-in to be able to do that. And it also, at the same time, it was kind of a way to outperform the Japanese announcers in their shouting of big moves, which was one of my introductions to Japanese wrestling. As I'm listening to it really, for the first time back in the 90s, I'm like, wow, these guys just really built it out. Holy moly. And so that was kind of where I wanted to do that. And my hesitancy in doing that shirt, even though it's my call, it's actually Naito's move name, and it's Naito's name. So that's why the shirt is just me and not Naito. And it is just simply the trailing O, and it's the emphasis on that. Because My job as an announcer is not to come up with my own catchphrases that I can sell shirts.
Right.
My job is to get the wrestlers over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a fine line. And there are a lot of times where I think, oh, this might be a good shirt idea. No, it probably isn't. No, 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 no. I say no much more than I say yes, which is why we've done so few designs. And the interplay that I have with Gino has kind of lent to our own dynamic, our own personality,
Mm-hmm.
our own thing, like being, how dare you? How dare you? How dare you? Those are, again, that's something that we can make a shirt off of based around our Burger Bros thing.
Yes.
And it works.
And that's where we've gone with these shirts since the Destino. I've got to know Gino as well through yourself, and we've been able to do the Best Burger Bros shirt with the high five in the burgers, which I love that one. I think that's really, really neat.
It's legitimate. In fact, we were laughing the other night because we were in Beppu, and we left the hotel and we were trying to find a McDonald's, and we got a cab, and the cab brought us because Gino was like, oh yeah, it's just up the road. But it wound up being a long way up the road. Mm-hmm. So we're eating McDonald's and we're having a great time and we're clinking our burgers like we always do. And then, wait a minute, it's pretty late. How are we going to get back to the hotel? And I look out, I'm looking over the road and I'm not seeing a lot of cars. Mm-hmm. Oh no, now we got to try to get a cab. So we wound up starting to walk. And I'm on one side of the 4-lane, Gino's on the other, and we get to where they have one of those elevated street crossings. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the stairwell, and I'm like, I could sleep here because it's getting late. And miracle of miracles, a cab is coming. And the cab is coming behind Gino at the cross street. And I yell, Gino, and he sees it at the same time as I'm yelling it. And he starts to run and he's waving his arms and basically throws himself on the hood of this cab to prevent the guy from driving away. And in spite of that, he still managed to bring us back to the hotel. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, it was fun. And we were laughing hysterically. And we were laughing as we were retelling that story a couple of nights ago.
Oh, has Gino told you about the Australian just down the road thing now? Because just down the road in Australia is like a weekend trip. I got family out there.
I think he said that. It's again, you have in just down the road, it's just down the road. And sure enough, it was. But burgers were great. Burgers were great there at McDonald's that night.
They are lovely. I'll tell you what, I've noticed actually when I was in Tokyo that I lived off McDonald's while I was out there, in the health food sort of industry. And I actually lost weight, would you believe, while I was in Tokyo. Even though I ate McDonald's daily, I lost weight because of all the walking.
Because you were walking, right?
Yeah. It's incredible. It's like my heaven, eat all the crap you want and walk everywhere. Exactly. But I noticed the flavor was very different because we don't get a lot of artificial sweeteners or things like that in our foods. In Britain, we're very sort of strict on regulations of what can be consumed and things like that. And I noticed when I got to Japan that there was a lot of real sugars and real fats, and the food was very authentic. And food, obviously, in Japan the traditional Japanese food has World Heritage status. So coming from America, how does the food differ in terms of flavor for yourself? Is it vastly different or is it quite similar?
It's better overall. Mm-hmm. It's more vibrant. Mm-hmm. It's less of a reliant on portions. Mm-hmm. America bludgeons you over the head with volume. Mm-hmm. It's like, speed metal, right? We may not play well, but we play fast and we play a lot of notes. It's, again, just everything is better. And the big difference between the United States and Japan is service. Mm-hmm. I'm a service guy. And when I get good service in a restaurant, I want to recognize it. And, you get good service in every restaurant here.
Hmm.
It goes back to sales. It goes back to, you can have this great t-shirt design,
Hmm.
but if you're not fulfilling the orders, if you're not, well, I don't have that size, or it's 3 months from now. Hey, where's my shirt? Oh, it got lost in the mail. Please.
Right.
I don't care how good the shirt is. I don't care what the design is. My favorite person and personality, whatever is on this shirt, I'm not going to do business with them.
Hmm.
So I avoid McDonald's in America because the service is rotten.
Hmm.
And the food is close to, comparable to, but if you do eventually get served at an American McDonald's, the burger is all sliding off the bun, it just looks like crap in the box, and the fries have no salt. It's just, and it's cold, and you just go, ugh. But here, everything is hot and fresh and looks nice. It looks like the picture on the menu.
It's incredible.
And that's the thing. It's service.
Hmm.
Going beyond meeting customers' expectations is the bare minimum. You need to go above and beyond making sure that that customer is served in such a way that they're going to want to come back and they're going to want to tell their friends. So if I'm buying a t-shirt from ABC Company and the service is lousy, I'm going to tell people.
Yeah.
And if the service is great on ABC Company, I'm going to tell people as well. That's how business is done.
100%. 100%. And as someone with a background in retail, it's vital. I'd always make sure I went that extra distance for any customer that walked through the doors, regardless of which industry it was. I've worked in like food, tourism, leisure, you name it. And I know that when I worked in retail for a video gaming company over here, a video game store, a year after I'd left that company, I was in there shopping and someone came over to me to ask me a question because they thought I still worked there because they were so familiar with my service.
Oh, wow.
It was something that was really mind-blowing. And I get it a lot because I used, my first business was a drumming store, Beat This Drum Store, and it was the first of its kind on the island. And to this day, I get people saying, "Oh, we missed your shop. Remember it?" There was like Google reviews, and it was always knowledge base and customer experience were the two things that I put above everything else.
Where in that is product, quality of product and price?
Yeah, it was about tertiary, I think, if anything.
Exactly. Price is immaterial.
Mm-hmm.
If you're overperforming, over delivering in quality and customer experience. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest takeaway that I have from Japan. And they talk about, oh, the culture and the people are so nice. It's ingrained in them to be great on service. You don't see, what do you want? All right. You don't see that here, man. They're on you. What can I get you? Sure, no problem. Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Welcome. Thank you, thank you. All the way through on your way out the door. Please let me take that. Please. Oh, please. Yeah.
It's not just in the stores either. It's everywhere, even in the public.
Yep.
Guy bumped into me on the way to Akihabara station and he was shouting, "I'm sorry," about 20 meters away. I'm going, dude, it's fine. Like, it's cool. We're used to it.
Yeah.
It's so different here. And I know when I left Tokyo, and it was so sad to leave. And this girl that I met at the airport, we were chatting, and we were both traveling to Turkey on our connecting flight. And we landed at Istanbul, and she turned around to me and she goes, "Well, we're not in Japan anymore," because it was just totally different, like totally stark contrast. Trash everywhere, and it was just unreal. It's Japan. For anyone who hasn't been, feels like heaven on earth when you get there. It's so different. I think that's a fair assessment.
Like if you go to, oh my gosh, the shop has escaped the name, the wrestling t-shirt shop.
Oh, Hao Ming Mask?
Hao Ming.
Yeah.
You go to Hao Ming and you're made to feel like the king of the world. And you see these incredible designs and this beautiful artwork, but it's the customer experience. You don't even know how much you spent. You don't even care. My bag is full. What am I going to do with all this stuff? Because He's like, oh, this. Yeah, sure. Give it to me. Yeah, absolutely. What? What am I going to do all this crap? But you're buying it because of the experience. You're buying it because the buying is secondary to the experience.
Yeah.
And if a retailer or a merchandiser, anybody can create that and maintain that, wow, now you've got something. And then you have to find a way to duplicate it, which is McDonald's key to success. McDonald's key of success is not hamburgers, it's duplication.
Mm-hmm.
Take the same restaurant, take the same ways of doing things here, 6 blocks down, 2 miles away, next town over and over from sea to shining sea. That's why McDonald's is McDonald's.
Mm-hmm. Simplicity, just always the simple approach. Never overcomplicate something that's, essentially meat and bread.
Yeah,
just that's all it needs to be.
Most of my experience in sales, all of my experiences, well, I can't say that. The jobs that I've had that have been in sales have been all on the business to business end.
Okay.
So I'm helping this business generate more revenue for them by giving them products and services that I think their customer base will benefit from. But I said, I can get them in the door, but I can't train your staff on how to sell. I can't give them a clean shop that, is easily accessible to and plenty of parking and clean and neat and organized. I can't do all of that. So I can just get them to the door. From what you do from there is up to you. But you're going to have these products and you're going to have these services that these people are going to want. I was in radio for a number of years. And I sold, in addition to doing DJ work and voiceover work, but I was also in sales. And, when you're out talking to small business owners and you realize that these people don't have a clue, they had the grand idea to get into business for themselves. They were, you can't argue with the entrepreneurial spirit, but they needed training. And so what I found myself doing was being much more of a marketing consultant and basically a retail consultant as well, even though I didn't have vast retail experience. I'm like, who's that guy over there with his shirt tails out and he's looking at his phone? Oh, that's Jimmy. He works part-time. Well, Jimmy could work part-time somewhere else. Because if that's the guy who is, customers are walking past him, he's not greeting any of them, he's not saying anything to them. How is that going to make the register turn? You got to tell people what you got. You got to welcome them to the store. You got to be attentive to their needs. You got to be intuitive enough to know their needs before they know them. You're creating need. Them coming into the store already says they're going to buy. Whether they buy one thing or 5 things is up to Jimmy. You trust Jimmy to get this done? If the answer is no, then you need to replace Jimmy.
Oh, that's 100%. And the phrase that has been doing the rounds a lot this year has been if X can't take care of themselves, they can't take care of Y. And if Jimmy, as in this example, isn't taking care of himself, perhaps his hair's a mess, and he says, looking at his in the camera, or I busted out the best suit jacket today as well, because I thought if anyone's going to be dressed up, it'll be Kevin Kelly, and you've exceeded yourself with the salmon t-shirt there, and I'm very impressed with it. Smart cash. But I just want an excuse, frankly. I've been stuck at home since March, and I bought this just before lockdown, this silk tie and everything, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to dress the part, I'm going to present myself, as we've just mentioned. If I'm going to explain to businesses why your branding is important, my branding should be important as a person.
You don't even realize this, but your microphone matches your jacket and tie. Because
I'm glad you picked up on it.
Bluish logo on the backside of the windscreen. I'm not sure if it's on the same on the front side.
It is, yeah.
But it blends beautifully with the tie and the jacket and the shirt, and it creates nothing is an accident, right? You're creating every opportunity to put across the message of your brand. And
Check will be there on the 6th, by the way, Just
You're very,
yeah.
my pleasure. On the house. But that's crucial. Like when I have my microphone, when I'm doing my interviews,
Mm.
I don't, like for this, I just have my microphone stand over here to the side. But when I'm at home, I have my mic here because I don't want it blocking my face. Now I have the windscreen, won't pop my peas, but I still have it here. So you get the best of audio quality with a USB microphone. But at the same time, they can still see this. They can see me talking. And I think all that's important. That's one of the biggest issues that I have with the mask.
Right.
As we segue smoothly over to COVID, is that you can't see people's expressions.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand them, one, but you also are missing out on so much of that communication process. 70% of communication is nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And we're missing out on that. And that's going to affect people depending on how long we have to wear these masks for. That's going to affect people. It's affecting kids and how they're developing now.
I mean, how much has Don Callis just made out of gimmick infringement then? Because
I told you, he was way far ahead of the curve.
Right? He went by the virus as well, so
yeah, he was doing it as a gimmick.
Yeah. I love it. He's lit the wrestling world on fire in the States and over here too, because we're huge Marks for Impact in the UK. But do you speak to him quite regularly still? Because obviously you were quite the duo in New Japan before he departed for his new role.
I sent him a little Christmas greeting, and other than that, the occasional greetings here and there. He's busy, I'm busy, so I think we talked a couple times over the summer while we were all shut down, and he was doing his tapings and I was doing my stuff from home. But pretty much that's it. But if he was here tomorrow, we'd pick up like we'd never missed a beat.
It's quite fun actually, because I feel like Gino has filled his role perfectly. He feels like the Australian Don Callis to me, and you complement each other so well. And with Chris, with his knowledge base, is phenomenal, and Rocky bringing sneaky style to commentary as well. It's such a great team for English speaking fans. And I know initially when we were first getting into New Japan outside of watching it via the English commentary, before that we had the Japanese commentary, and as you said, it was very dynamic and very different. I know a lot of fans actually said that they almost preferred the Japanese commentary because of that energy. But now with yourself and the team as it is, you bring such energy to the English performances that the dynamic is very balanced between the two languages.
We try to bring, and I've said this many times, we have to overperform. We have to over-deliver. Why do fans need English commentary? Fans don't need commentary to watch wrestling. But you have Japanese commentary. You're already watching a Japanese wrestling show. You're not understanding what's being said. But why need English? Well, obviously, we have to create that need. And the need is because we're going to give you history with Chris, moves and description of the mat techniques with Rocky, fun and personality and tomfoolery with Gino, and me keeping the boat in the water, going straight and kind of explaining all of this so that we can, my job is to get everybody over. My job is to get Chris over, Rocky over, Gino over. I don't need to get me over.
Yeah.
My job is to get everybody else and the product in front of them over. And that's so the fans go, wow, that was fantastic. I understand everything. That's our role.
And you absolutely succeed with that as well, from my perspective personally. I know I've learned a lot more about Japanese wrestling, especially since Chris came on board, because he has a fact for everything. Like, I've never known anything like it. I like to pride myself on my wrestling knowledge from an American standpoint and British background, but his knowledge of Japanese wrestling is, in my opinion, unmatched. I defy any commentator on any company to have that knowledge base that he's got.
Yeah, the way to connect the past to the now is so crucial. And again, with my television experience, I've helped Chris tell stories better.
Right.
Because you ask him and he can write, a 10,000 word dissertation on subject.
Mm.
You may only have 5 seconds to get a point across.
Mm-hmm.
So I've worked with him on, hey, we got to be real quick here with this. We only got a little bit of time, so maybe 2 or 3 lines,
Mm-hmm.
and he gets it.
Wow.
And because I know the flow of the show, I'm feeling it I'm the conductor, right? And I know where the sound is coming from, and I try to lay out for the ring announce. And if he's in midpoint, I'll give him the hand stop. I'll put the brake on him. And depending on how long the pause is, I might need to just point at him for him to continue. Or, Chris, you were saying something before we were interrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And then he picks up where he was.
It's such a beautiful balance.
It's the flow, man. We just try to flow out there. And it's not about the notes on the page.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about, any of the details in that, because I have tons of notes,
mm-hmm.
and I maybe don't get to half of them,
right?
Because I have it there in case I need it, and if it works, I'm going to get it in, and I'm familiar with my notes, so that if I see something unfolding, and then I got a little nugget about that, then I pull that note out. Otherwise, I just write it just in case I need it. When like, for example, when Rocky and I called Tanahashi versus Zack Sabre Jr. in the G1. And I could have never had notes for that match because it was a wrestling showcase.
Right.
And there were Tana hit the ropes just one time, just to give himself a little bit of propulsion moving forward. Otherwise, there was no rope running. It was all on the ground.
Yeah.
So that meant I needed to really rely on Rocky. And if I would have been rigid in my notes, we would have lost some of this, what made that match so special. And if you're in the moment and you're watching the match and you're calling the match and you're realizing what you're seeing, because I've seen a lot of wrestling in my life, hey, this is special, and here's why. And you got to be able to tell that in just a little bit, and then let them continue to paint that picture. So we're describing the color and not telling people how the paint is applied. You can see that. But we're describing the emotion that you feel when the Bob Ross painting is complete.
I love that. That match was incredible. And as you say, one hit to the ropes and everything else was, Zack is such a technical wizard. I've never seen anything like him. And he's not someone who puts personality over his talent. Like, not to say that he's not got a personality, because he's hilarious, but he does his work. Like, he's a very straightforward British wrestler who does his work and lets his moves speak for themselves. Like, there's none of the showboating. There's none of the, as you would see in I'm trying to think of a name. Tanahashi, who is very flashy. He's the ace. He knows how top tier he is, but there's the presentation with him. Whereas Zack, he's got very neutral gear, very straightforward traditional gear. He comes to the ring, he does his work and leaves. Now, whether there's the Suzuki-gun shenanigans along with that, by the by, but as someone who's watched Zack for a long time, he feels very traditional.
Right.
And
as he walks to the ring, though, he's already creating the emotion within the viewer. Why?
Yes.
Because he always looks like someone farted. And he's got this sneer on his face, and as he gets into the ring, and he's built like this, and it doesn't matter. Because
that's our resting Brit face, by the way. That's just how we are. Yeah.
and so that just makes immediately he's the villain. Immediately he's the guy I'm going to boo. And you want to see him get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
And he'll get his ass kicked for most of the match. He'll put these terrible, torturous holds on people, and he might win, he might lose. That's what makes him and Taichi so interesting as a team, because they're different, but they're very much the same. You get that visceral reaction the minute they come out. As soon as that music hits, and you realize Taichi isn't really singing, and he knows he's not singing, and he doesn't care. He's going to pretend and continue to pretend and annoy you in his pretending. And again, it's to create that reaction to get heat, and they do it beautifully and different, but very much the same.
I'm always glad to see Taichi because I know Miho's not going to be very far behind him, so that's always a good thing for us fans.
COVID thing's got to end, man.
I
We got to
know,
get
right?
back to. We got to get back. We got to get Peter in with Bullet Club.
Oh.
We've got to have interpretive dance.
It's always
And-
needed. Don Callis
Yeah.
will be on the first flight back to Tokyo as soon as Peter turns up again.
By the way, she's booked. Oh, hey Don, good to see you. How'd you
Kevin,
get here so
I'm
fast?
here. I've dropped the EVP role.
As he rips his
Yeah,
mask off.
mask's on.
Oh
The plane just smoke coming out the back of it. Don's there.
my God.
Oh, bless him. But yeah, it's actually a funny Peter story for you. So when we went to Wrestle Kingdom, I was super excited to see her for less than obvious reasons. And I was talking to my friend David that was sat next to me. I said, "Oh, I can't wait for, Yujiro to come out with Peter and all this." And I've got my super zoom camera ready. And she comes out, she's wearing more clothes than I've ever seen her wear in her life. And I turned out, I was gutted. I was absolutely gutted. I said, I've flown all the way from the UK. She got dressed.
I want to see skin.
Yeah. And that is such a frowned upon thing these days as well.
Right.
Which
She's
obviously-
such a lovely. Oh, she's so lovely.
Yeah, I can well
My
imagine.
goodness. They put her. We were in Sapporo, and for whatever reason, there were no other dressing rooms available. So she went to the. She was in just her street clothes, and then took her gear bag. She was doing an autograph thing before the event, and so she was clothed, but she had her Peter outfit on underneath. She had like a jacket on or something like that, and her English is limited. My Japanese is limited. I forget who was there with me, either Gino or somebody, and she was just a lovely person. Just very nice, and wanted to take pictures. And it was Gino, yeah, because they took funny pictures together. But we just had, it was just she's just a nice person. So, and I never see Miho before the show. It's interesting. Like I've never seen her arrive. I have no idea. I'm wondering if it's like, Randy Savage, Elizabeth. They'd get to the building, and Savage would immediately throw Liz in the broom closet, and that would be it.
Oh, man.
Wouldn't see her until he went to get her.
Liz was something different. Like, she was incredible.
Oh.
She wasn't the typical sort of woman in wrestling, I felt like, and not to disparage or anything like that, but she had this grace about her that it transcended the screen. And
Well, she wasn't, she wasn't a wrestler.
yeah,
She wasn't Judy Martin. She wasn't Moolah. She wasn't Penny Banner. She was Elizabeth. She was a beautiful woman. And she had that sweet innocence about her. And it just worked. Again, the branding. If we would have seen her, collar and elbow tie up with somebody, it would have immediately
shattering.
It would have been totally against her brand, because that was who she was.
How do you feel? And feel free to say that I can't answer this if it goes beyond the realms of what you can talk about, because I'm not sure how much autonomy you get as far as outside of company lines. But with regards to women's wrestling in New Japan, obviously there's no women's division, but we have seen Stardom matches and Joshi wrestlers coming in for Wrestle Kingdom in 2020, and then again we've got matches this year. What is the viewpoint in terms of women's wrestling as far as Japan goes? Because we've had like the women's evolution in the Western world and things like that, and women coming to prominence. Is that going to be a thing that comes full circle with Japanese wrestling as well?
I don't know enough about Japanese women's wrestling to be able to say yes or no, but I know that it's important to strengthen Japanese women's wrestling and the companies that are, the rising tide raises many ships. So if Bushiroad's ownership of both Stardom and New Japan helps Stardom, and then also to all the other women's companies, because if they have and I think they just did something the other night, that will help all of Japanese women's wrestling. which is what the goal of Bushiroad's ownership was. Bushiroad obviously sees something marketable that they can make money from. But the goal to make money in Japanese women's wrestling is to have a strong, vibrant scene.
Right.
They need to flip the fan base, you know, and to get the pervs out and bring in moms and dads and kids.
Right.
You know, because through the early 2000s in New Japan Pro Wrestling, if you go back and you watch some of those shows, it's a lot of this.
Yeah.
40-year-old men. And now it's moms, dads, kids. It's the whole family. So I think that that's critically important for the success of any wrestling company. And that if Stardom appearances on New Japan shows help Stardom, and by connection helps all of the Japanese women's wrestling scene, then so be it. I think it's not going to help Japanese women's wrestling if Stardom simply has a couple of matches, you know, featured on New Japan shows.
Yeah.
That's not going to help them. But what will help them is the marketing and the back end stuff that can help them to create the type of imagery that is going to entice a family of 4 to come to an event and not, you know, a 37-year-old single man. Yeah. Like, for example, Pepper Lunch. Did you eat pepper lunch when you came to Japan?
No, I never had a pepper lunch. No.
All right. Well, Pepper Lunch is a famous chain in Japan, and they had almost gone out of business. They really retreated. And I think I asked Steve Corino why, because he was a huge Pepper Lunch fan.
Right.
And it used to be the place for only single guys to go and eat.
Okay.
And women never went. And then there was, you know, a woman who got attacked in one of the restaurants, and they shut down.
Right.
They made the decision. So they rebranded their restaurants to make them more family friendly. So it's not just lonely single guys. It's, you know, mom, dad, the kids, night out, you know, and that's very important. So they took a long, hard look at that. You know, mixed success. I think it's, you know, a little bit more inclusive. You go in now and you see women in there. It doesn't seem like to be like a woman would be afraid to go into Pepper Lunch. But certainly if I'm a woman, female wrestling fan, or if I'm the wife or the mom, I don't know if I'm going to go to you know, until they flip the fan base of Japanese women's wrestling. Right. I've heard that from a lot of the girls, that the flipping of the fan base is something that's critically important. Wrestling companies are not want to do that because they see, okay, we've had success here and we're going to continue being successful with this. No, man, every once in a while, you're going to just flip the fan base.
Yeah.
And you're going to shake things up and change things up and do things differently.
And that is absolutely true, because it's a rolling tide all the time. You know, trends change. I mean, we look back to, excuse me a sec, losing myself. If we look back to when you were in WWF, would have been peak Attitude Era, you know, 97 through 2000, early 2000s. Women in WWF back then were portrayed very differently to how they're portrayed in WWE these days.
Absolutely.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't feel like it necessarily hurt the women's brand, because they were getting the Playboy deals and the downloads and the hits online. But I don't think the talent as such was the focus. They were more sexy first, wrestler second. But then you had women like Chyna, Lita, Trish that transcended that and made the wrestling the focus. So where does that balance sit? Because with Japanese women's wrestling, obviously there's things like the gravure films where, you know, we've had women like Asuka and Hikaru Shida that have done these quote unquote sexy films where their wrestling doesn't even factor. So where do you find that balance? Because it's a very different world than it is for the male talent, where sexy doesn't even necessarily exist outside of how their physiques are. And I
It's
always find that really difficult to
yeah,
process.
I think it's up to each individual performer to make that decision. I
Mm,
can tell you this, that there were a number of girls, right? Isn't it a famous story about AJ Lee? Didn't and she was a
mhm.
big part of that women's revolution, didn't
Yeah.
wasn't she motivated by Lita?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, so however, and Lita was more portrayed for her toughness and being able to get in there physically and do things,
Hmm.
whether it was Trish Stratus
Hmm.
or Lita or China. You saw strong, powerful women who eventually would overcome, their male or female persecutors. I think that's very important. Nowadays, I think it's up to every woman. It's up
Mm.
to everybody who is in the business of creating their own brand. Where is that line? Well, we don't know where the line is. Maybe a line doesn't exist.
Hmm.
Maybe fans can separate themselves at one line, and then for another group of fans, maybe that line is way over here, either one
Yeah.
side or the other. And I don't think any of us can judge.
Yeah.
It's very difficult, because that's not an easy decision to make, personally or professionally. But again, if a woman decides, in 2020 that she's going to do a sexy film, it isn't the end of her career in one
Right.
avenue or the other. In many respects, it's the launching pad. I mean, look at Kim Kardashian. Look at
Yeah.
these iconic brands now who have launched their careers for things that might have, well, that would probably, she'll never get booked again. No, no, she's more popular than ever. But it's really up to each individual.
I look at someone like a Priscilla Kelly, who a few years back, in fact, it was a couple of years ago, did something that shocked everybody. And it was all the talk, and she'll never get booked anywhere, and this, that, and the other. And now her talent has superseded that completely. She's wrestling for NWA and has created a brand for herself as someone who is predominantly coming forward as a young, promising wrestler. And that whole episode is behind. And it's incredible and good for her because she's a fantastic wrestler.
Sure. And talent is always going to come out in the
Yeah.
end. You've got two left feet and you're no good, you're not going to make it. But if you're a talented athlete and you understand what you're trying to portray in the ring, and that connects with the style that you wrestle and the audience gravitates towards it, then you're going to find success. And everyone just says, what did she do? Oh, really? Oh, wow. And we think too, like, a lot of people live on Twitter.
Mm.
A lot of people do live on Twitter, but in the US, only 27% of the population is on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a vast audience out there that doesn't know things that the Twitterverse gets upset about and beats the drums about, and they're completely unaware of these things. Obviously, the key for every company now is to reach beyond their social media audience and to speak to the hundreds of millions of people who have no idea what's going on in your social media world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, social media is such a minefield as well, and we could probably do another hour just on that, I should think.
That's what goes back to me. Here's my biggest thing, and this is why I
Okay.
said this earlier on. The tweet that you don't send many times is the best.
Right.
Because you get yourself really seriously. If I have a bunch of political opinions, and I'm a smart guy, I can have, on the right or on the left. I have friends that are both.
Mm-hmm.
I'm much more of a libertarian. You know what I mean? I want government out of my life. I don't want anybody to tell me what to do. Just don't screw me over.
Yeah.
But I have friends that are incredibly conservative and incredibly liberal. and I can have conversations with them both, and neither of them want to fight me.
Yeah.
So it's, but again, if you're putting your political positions out there, if you're putting your societal positions out there, what's to be gained by doing it? You're not going to change anybody's opinion.
Right.
And if you're in the public eye, just don't press send.
Yeah.
It's better to have a conversation.
Oh, yeah.
If you and I are talking off air, and I said, did you see this? You know, I don't trust anybody. I don't trust any politician, any government, nothing. Mm-hmm. It's all crap, and they're all trying to control us. You know what I mean? I'm one of those guys. So just leave me alone. I'll pay my taxes. Just leave me alone. Yeah. If I want to put up if I want to take my hedges down, I'm going to take my hedges down.
Right.
I'll put something else up that'll look better. Trust me. Don't tell me how to live.
Big believer in do what you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to get married? Gay, straight, man, what? I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
Live your life. Are you happy? You love each other? Well, good. Go be happy.
Yeah.
Well, no, there is no well, Do you want them to tell you how to live your life? Well, no, of course not. Well, how dare you tell them?
Exactly.
Give me a break.
Yeah, we see that a lot here too, especially with all Brexit and everything else going on. It's just become a nightmarish sort of mire of people's opinions. And
don't trust government, my man.
Well, that's a whole other podcast right there.
If people can be responsible for themselves, if people took personal responsibility, big story, in the NFL in Washington, right. Dwayne Haskins, former number 1 draft pick quarterback, got released by the team. And that's a huge blow for them. Mm-hmm. They invested millions of dollars in him and had him as a franchise quarterback. And 3 years later, he's off the team. A lack of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And there are, who are you accountable to? Are you accountable to a boss? Well, then you have to have personal responsibility in that. Well, I'm an independent contractor. Okay, well, who's going to hire you?
Yeah.
Unless you're going to put your own shows on, you have some personal responsibility.
Yeah.
So you cannot have freedom without responsibility. That's baked in the cake. Well, I want somebody to take care of me. Oh, so you're a socialist? God, no. Ugh. Well, then you have to live your own life, and you have to carve your own path, and you have to understand that there are limits to that. I can't bulldoze a line of trees separating my neighbor's house that he uses for shade because I don't like the way they look.
Yeah.
Well, they're on my property. Well, the way you negotiate with that then is you talk to your neighbor and you say, hey, what these trees, what are we going to do about them? What needs to be done? Well, they don't look so great. Well, I like them because they provide shade for my yard and they keep my hydrangea bush from drying up in the summer. Okay, well, how about this? And you come up with some sort of compromise.
Yeah, that is the key.
That's life. It's compromise. But people don't talk anymore, Rich.
Oh, right.
People text. They text. That's not communication. I talked to so-and-so. Well, what did he say? Let me bring up the text. You didn't talk to him then. You texted with him. And you want to really find common ground with somebody? Have a conversation.
Yeah, there's no nuance in text.
No.
There's no intonation, there's no anything. And the amount of misunderstandings I've had with the written word as opposed to the spoken word. And from a business standpoint, talking to someone, when we met in Tokyo, and the amount of people when I've gone to shows I've spoken to who have a totally different impression of me as opposed to someone who I've direct messaged and never spoken to in person.
I think that's probably the reason why I was very open to talking with you and working with you, because I had met you.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation, and that you weren't just, random guy on Twitter. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I remember meeting him. Lovely chap.
Oh. That's a nice segue to something I've been dying to ask you about since it happened. Okay. And this is my last sort of thing that I want to bring up. Was a moment for me that was utterly life-changing, and for you it was Tuesday, Street Fighter the movie reference to my friend Jimbo. Um, you dropped my name on commentary. I think it was at Dominion during
Mhm.
Okada's entrance last year. My phone exploded because everyone that was watching that knew me knew I was asleep for one, and knew that I needed to see this. And I couldn't believe it, that Kevin Kelly, who I've watched on television for decades, said my name on TV.
Mhm.
And that meant more to me than anything, because what I realized was that you don't hear designers' names mentioned. When you look at all the iconic wrestling shirts, like the NWO shirt, the Hulkamania shirts, the Cena shirt, whoever it is, the biggest stars in this industry, their shirts are designed by someone, and you never hear their name, let alone on a pay-per-view, and let alone during the world champion's entrance on a pay-per-view. So for me, that was like, this is totally different. That was such a moment, not just because it was my name, but in terms of wrestling in general, it felt like something very different. What led up to that? Was that just you being my friend, or was that a thing that you felt benefited the conversation at that moment?
Well, I mean, it was an important spot on a show,
Mm-hmm.
and I have gone out of my way to try to highlight those who are part of this whole big community that we've developed it predates me, but
Mm.
I jumped in and everybody that was in the community welcomed me with open arms, and we've seen the community grow.
Mm-hmm.
That doing good work and doing things to be supportive of what we're putting together here deserves recognition.
Mm.
Now, the poor guy who ran Showbuckle, and I put that over, and then all of a sudden they went, what? Without conferring with me,
Mm-hmm.
they just had a hard, fast rule, and they shut him down.
Thanks.
That wasn't my aim, but I realized I got to be careful about what I say and who I say it about. And again, there is so we have some responsibility in that. Again,
Right.
I have freedom to say what I want. I'm not produced.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's responsibility in that. And I learned a lesson at Showbuckle's expense that I got to be careful with what I say and when I say it, because there are people listening and there are people watching all the time. So yeah, there may have been a little bit of selfishness in that regard. I wasn't like trying to sell T-shirts.
Yeah.
But from a personal standpoint, I felt like you deserved recognition. And I wanted to make sure that everybody knew that you're very talented. And during Okada's entrance is probably a time where more people are going to watch than anything else. And if they're going to go back and rewatch that match, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just going to watch Okada's match. Oh, okay. Well, I'll generally I've tried to sell them on the idea of sponsorships.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have commercials, but I can certainly do reads. And if we sold them, hey, this brand, like I pitched Jimmy Seafood, who of course is a great supporter of professional wrestling. And then I had a conversation with John. He was like, yeah, let's do it. And never went any further because they just see it. They don't see it the same way. I was like, it's you listen to an NFL game on the radio.
Yeah.
And they're, first down. Well, that's the 15th first down of the game. And Geico can save you 15% on your car insurance by calling 1-800 blah, 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 blah. That's the way it's done. And not that it would take away from the match, but we certainly have that time from when the last exit is and the wide shot and either Abe or Ozaki starts the next ring announce. I've got 30 seconds to a minute where I can knock out a read.
Yeah.
And there'd be value in it for the customer, and the brand would obviously not suffer. So it's partially like an experiment too. Like, let's see how much, and by you telling me that your phone blew up and everyone's like, oh my God, you just got mentioned.
Yeah.
That means that people are watching and people are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And we should take advantage of that. Not take advantage of the audience, but take advantage of the fact that we have people who are listening. And if there's nothing going on at the present time, let's get a read in here. Let's make some money. Even if and that's why. And I always sit down like with Rocky and Chris, and we'll go, all right. So after the first match, we'll mention New Japan Strong, and I'll get you into that, Rocky.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, let's talk about tickets going on sale for this. We'll do this after the second match. So we always try to take care of our business in between the matches, because that's a great time to do it. That's how wrestling works.
Right.
Hasn't anybody ever watched wrestling before?
What's this thing, wrestling? Yeah.
Yeah, like Gordon Soley used to always do that. I had no idea who these people were, but he would say, hey, I want to send a special greeting to William Thompson, big fan of Championship Wrestling from Florida. I have no idea where William Thompson is as an accountant. If it's his neighbor, I have no idea. But I remember, hey, he gave this guy a shout out. He wished, Myrna and Joe a happy 35th anniversary. Oh, that's lovely. Myrna and Joe.
And that's just it, isn't it? It means something to the person that's hearing it.
Yes.
Those moments. And like the kids that get Brett sunglasses back in the, I always wanted those. And, or anything like that, it just means something. It's a memory. And it's all part of that customer experience that we talked about before, where to keep a customer coming back, you give them an experience that they'll remember. And for me, certainly that was an experience I'll never forget. It's always going to be my pinned tweet. It's the thing that just, it blew my mind. And it means more for my business as well, because of your word carrying so much weight. And the amount of wrestlers that know who you are and listen to you and respect you, to have you saying my name on air, just it elevates. And that's what we're all about. We've all got to elevate each other,
Exactly. One of the things that I miss with COVID is being able to travel and to do seminars.
Right.
So one of the, and it's always like in cooperation with a wrestling trainer. I'm not going to show you how to properly apply an armbar, but I'm going to talk to you about how to do promos, how to speak when you're in front of a camera, how to do things to separate yourself from every other wrestler who wants your job, or help you to get the job that someone else has. So I'm working with somebody now, and I'll be putting more out about it very soon, where I'm actually going to do lessons, some of the things that I've done in various seminars across the country, across the United States. I'm going to be doing them, and fans will be able to access them through website, as so the entire wrestling curriculum, if you will. There will be wrestling lessons in the ring. There's going to be tape watch, how to watch a match, what to look for, what stands out, some of the biggest and best things that can happen in a match in front of 30 people. Well, there's good that happened in this match. Let's highlight the good. So that's going to be one of the projects that we'll be launching in the new year. And when we're ready to go with it, you'll be the first to know.
Nice. I will be sharing it voraciously across social media as well, because
yeah, and again, it's just the idea of, let's help every wrestler to become as good as they possibly can be, so that when they get an opportunity to wrestle in front of many people or no people, they're prepared for it. And how to, because again, wrestling it's going to be tough to come back from this. It's going to be tough, especially in the US on the indie scene. It's going to be because a lot of promoters aren't going to promote shows anymore.
Right.
And so I have a feeling that the number of venues available, the number of promoters that put shows on, it might get smaller. And until it's shown that wrestling can be profitable, I think that's going to be the status quo. So it's important that people take this time in the industry to make themselves better. Obviously, hit the weights and get your gear right and get all these different things right, and do as much wrestling training as you can. And if you can't attend to school because the school is closed, well, then you've got to be watching and studying here. And if I can help with, teaching, a wrestler how to construct a promo so that they can record something from their home, and that would be included as part of just an all video show, like there's no fans, well, then that's good. They're going to have an audience for it because people are still watching it. There's just not as much content as there was. So,
right.
so I'm excited to be doing this.
I think that's vitally important, and especially in an era where it is a lack of interpersonal connection, where it is, a wrestler in a ring talking to nobody, the crew perhaps, or just an empty room. That connection just isn't there in the same way.
It's
So,
very difficult. It's very, very difficult.
mm,
But we have to overcome that because,
mhm.
again, people are watching what we're presenting, what's being presented, and they want that same good experience as if there, was a room full of people screaming and going nuts. So how do you do that? Well, it's tricky. It can be done,
Oh yeah,
but if you can master the ability to do so, you'll set yourself apart. And when they do let people back in, none of those skills will go away.
yeah,
They'll just be
exactly.
enhanced.
Well, I was always taught as a young drummer that you perform for 10 people as you perform for 10,000.
Exactly.
And which I feel is a neat way to wrap this up. So for the 10 people that have watched me and you converse today, where can they find you on social media, Kevin?
At Real Kevin Kelly on Twitter is my primary source. I also have an Instagram, but I really don't go there very much.
Okay.
That also is Real Kevin Kelly. And if you need any of the wonderful pieces of merchandise that Rich Baker has designed for me and for Gino Gambino and for several others, either ProWrestlingTees.com and our most recent How Dare You shirt is available at teespring.com/what?
Style and Profile. It basically, the easiest way to find anything we've done is to go to styleandprofile.com, go into the portfolio on there, and all of the images that have a design link to a shirt are clickable. So you can click through and it'll take you straight to the store page, or you can use the store link. That's
Styleandprofile.com.
Yeah, for all your needs of design or branding stuff. Super professional. I've got a suit on.
Look at it.
Yeah, right. So I always like to finish, when I was doing Smack Talk, I always like to finish with this question. It's one last question. If there's one person you'd want to give a shout out to and put over in a positive way that doesn't normally get any recognition, who would it be?
Even though she would hate it, I would have to say my wife.
Right.
My wife, Doria, has been by my side as long as I have been in the wrestling industry. And over the 9 months where I was home, I realized how much she did on a day in, day out basis. So I never give her a shout out because she hates it. She hates hearing her name. She hates any recognition. She's the most shy person I've ever seen. Once you get to know her, she's fine. But, as far as public speaking, she would be, she was the kid in school who would sort of mumble and rock back and forth holding the podium and would get a C on the speech. And it killed her to have to do it. So I would say my wife, Doria, because she would never get a shout out any other way, but she certainly deserves it.
Absolutely. Yeah. God bless her. And cool. Thank you, Kevin, for all your time. I think this is possibly the longest conversation I've done with anybody, and I could probably go all day talking to yourself.
Yeah.
We'll have to
come
do
back.
this again.
We'll do some more. We'll do some more at another time.
Absolutely. Definitely will. Right. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor speaking to you, sir. Have a great Wrestle Kingdom.
Thank you.
No worries. Thank you to everyone that's listened and tuned in. Don't forget styleandprofile.com for all your design needs. Hit up the portfolio, as we mentioned, and the store pages to find all the designs available to buy. And just remains to say thank you and see you on the next one.